Alright folks, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to be just briefly explaining general care and maintenance for your FirekeeperForge axe or knife. Now, this is my own personal knife. I've been using it for a couple months. I just cleaned off a little bit of rust from it. You can go ahead and watch the previous video on how to do that. And today I'm going to be showing you how to keep the blade from rusting, how to make sure the handle stays nice for a long time, and how to care for the sheaths as well. So let's get started. In the last video, you saw I used this stuff right here to remove some rust from this blade. So if you're interested in seeing that, go check it out. But anyway, just as a brief recap, this Flitz metal polish is a very fine abrasive, and if you ever get any rust or corrosion on the blade, you can just scrub that in with some steel wool and we'll get rid of it super fast. Anyway, an important part of knowing how to care for your blade is to keep it from rusting. Now, I use high carbon steel on all of my cutlery. There's a lot of really wonderful benefits of high carbon steel, but one drawback is if you're not taking care of it, it will rust and corrode. So the best way to keep that from happening is to never store it wet in the sheath. So if you're done using it, you can just take a little rag, wipe it off. That's all it takes. It might take 1 or 2 passes. And if you're just out in the field, that's plenty to just stick it right back in the sheath and you're good to go. Now, if you have any sort of oil, wax, protectant, I use the stuff I sell, which is blade balm. If you're storing it for longer periods of time, I would recommend just doing a light coat of this stuff. Now, I get the consistency just right to where it's nice and sticky and stays on the blade. And I'd recommend just putting this on all parts of the knife. And this will, for longer term storage, be something that'll really help prevent corrosion. So just like that. I just use this stuff for the leather, for the wood, for the steel, for everything. It's a good general purpose, all-purpose protectant. And that'll keep the handle nice and hydrated. It'll make it look nice and shiny and awesome again. And it'll just keep everything nice and protected. So that's the big thing to prevent corrosion and damage, is to just, when you're storing it, when you get home after your trip, whatever it may be, just put a nice light coat of this stuff on. Any food safe oil will work. This stuff just works a little better because it's a little stickier. Now for the handle, if it ever looks dried out, which is something that may happen if it's not being taken care of or having some sort of blade balm put on it, I'd recommend putting a couple coats of Danish oil on it. This is the stuff I use. It's completely food safe and it's better than linseed oil. There's no harsh chemicals or anything in it. And it's better than true oil because, again, for that same reason. So this is what I recommend. And I only recommend using this if the handle just looks really dried out, really dry. If it doesn't look like that, just a coat of this stuff will be just fine. You can also see on the pins, the brass is starting to corrode a little bit. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you don't like it, you can just take a little steel wool. And that'll kind of polish that handle right up again to its nice high luster. So some super fine steel wool, the Flitz metal polish, some blade balm, potentially some of this tried and true oil. It's basically all you need to keep this knife going for the next couple 100 years. So just a little steel wool on there, blast it off that corrosion, and then you can just add a little bit of blade balm to it or similar. You use like butcher block wax or anything you got really. Just a nice coat of that, and that'll keep your handle looking nice for a really long time. Now, to keep your FirekeeperForge blade lasting for essentially forever, I would recommend doing routine maintenance on them. I'd recommend keeping the blade balm or similar protectant on there as much as you can. And really, if something starts corroding or whatever, it's much easier to address it immediately as opposed to in the future, which is what I did. Now, I just used this blade as an experiment to see how bad it could get, and it wasn't that bad. But it's definitely easier to address things as they come up. Now, for leather, again, if you do this maintenance regularly enough, there's not really much else you got to do. So I just recommend when you're blade balming the knife, just put a nice coat on the leather, and that'll just keep things nice and hydrated It'll keep the leather from cracking, drying out, and not being a good sheath anymore. So just a little coat of that stuff, and that'll do you just fine. So there we go. That's just a little quick video on how general maintenance works on your FirekeeperForge blade. I'd recommend just doing it regularly, and your knife should last a long, long time. And also addressing things as they come up and not pushing them off is pretty important for the longevity and long-term care of your blade. So if there's any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I put all this information with every blade I sell on the little product care sheet. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to let me know, and I'll do my best to answer them.